I am the thing that haunts your nightmares in the backwoods of Appalachia. My name is Sawbones, and I am what your granny used to warn you about when you went playing too deep in them hills as a kid. I've been around since before your great-granddaddy's time, preying on the unlucky souls who stumble into my territory. You see, I ain't no normal man. I'm a skinwalker, a powerful, evil creature that can take on human form, but my true visage is a sight that would freeze your blood colder than a winter night up here. Folks have called me by many names over the centuries: grinning man, old razor guts, fiend of the hills, but I like to go by Sawbones on account of my particular way of doing things. I roam these old hollows, stalking my prey from the blackest shadows. Could be a hunter who's wandered off too far from the trail. Could be a young couple looking for a quiet spot to park their truck. Sometimes it's just some foolish kids off playing in the woods after their folks warned them not to. Once I spot them, I start working my dark magic. First, I'll let out a soft kind of whimpering cry like a lost baby or a hurt animal. Inevitably, their natural human kindness gets the better of them and they head in my direction to investigate. As they get closer, I'll throw my voice and the cries will seem to move in a different direction, luring them deeper into the tangled woods and old abandoned mining tunnels. Now they're trapped and helpless, easy pickings. That's when I slip into the shape of whatever will terrify them most: a hideous beast, a deformed half-human monstrosity, a pile of wriggling snakes and insects. When their eyes go wide with horror, I let loose my true face for just a moment before pouncing. The shrieks of stark panic are like sweet music to my ears. I drag them, still living but soon wishing they were not, back to my lair, an old rotten shack deep in the holler. Blackened bones and gore hung from the rafters. That's where the real fun begins. I tie them down and let the terror really sink in, before introducing them to my favorite tools: rusted hacksaws, dull cleavers, pliers made of jagged bone. Oh, how they cry and beg as I slowly, exquisitely take them apart piece by piece, their screams echoing through the woods. I don't kill them right away though. Where's the sport in that? No, I draw it out as long as I can, drinking in their unbearable agony and feeding off their life force like a sweet, ethereal vapor. Their pain, their fear, their slow descent into blessed oblivion as blood and bone are separated hour by tortuous hour. That's my sustenance. By the time their mangled corpse finally goes still and quiet, they've given me enough spiritual essence to keep me going for months or even years. I toss what's left of their ruined meat into the pit out back, letting their souls join the eternally tortured chorus of groans and suffering that provides the nightmarish soundtrack to this densely wooded purgatory. So you listen up close, yeah, here. Next time your folks warn you about staying out too late or wandering too far off the beaten path around these parts, you mind them good. Else you might hear that mournful cry in the distance one night and come stumbling into the wrong hollow. If that happens, well, let's just say you'll be meeting Sawbones in a way that'll haunt whatever's left of your soul forever. Yes, the dreadful tale of Sawbones came to an end. A deathly silence fell over the gathered crowd. Faces ashen, eyes wide with terror. Nobody dared breathe a word for fear of provoking something. Finally, an old crone in the back shook her head slowly. "That's an awful story to tell, Jesse," she said in a quavering voice. "You know, old Sawbones ain't nothing but a boogeyman parents used to scare kids. Ain't no need to put such fear into these folks." Jesse, the wrinkled storyteller, fixed her with a steady gaze. A faint grin spread across his weathered features, revealing a mouthful of browning, misshapen teeth. "You just keep telling yourself that, Prudy," he rasped. "But we both know the truth. We all know there's things that go bump in these here hills, darker than you can fathom." He rose creakily to his feet, shawl slipping from his hunched shoulders. In the flickering light from the campfire, his shadow loomed larger than seemed natural. Some of you're gonna find out one day, Jesse continued, scanning the horrified listeners. When you hear them cries in the night and feel that dread prickling at the back of your neck. When the trees start whispering your name in voices that chill you to the bone, he jabbed a gnarled finger at the assembled group. And maybe then you'll remember what this old codger told you about poor souls who went missing without a trace. About the things that haunt these eternal hollows and make even the creatures of the wood shake at their presence. With surprising swiftness, Jesse swept his shawl around his shoulders and turned away, hunched figure swallowed by the enveloping night. Only his gravelly voice remained. You'll believe in Sawbones soon enough. You'll all be believers when he comes calling. A collective chill went through those gathered around the dying campfire as Jesse's words faded into the enveloping night. Nervous glances were exchanged, and more than one person pulled their coat tighter against the suddenly biting chill. That crazy old coot, someone murmured, trying to alleviate the tension with a weak chuckle. He always did spin a hell of a yarn, the others forced uneasy smiles, but it was clear Jesse's ghastly tale had burrowed deeper than any wanted to admit. In the uneasy silence that followed, every snapping twig and rustling leaf carried a menacing undertone, as if the monstrous Sawbones itself stalked just beyond the reach of the guttering flames. One by one, the rattled campers opted to retreat to their tents, rather than risk provoking any more chilling tales from the shadows. As the last lingering sparks finally died, an inky pall of darkness consuming the remote hollow, an eerie quiet descended over the makeshift campsite. It was then that the first faint sound drifted through the still night air. A soft, piteous whimpering, like a wounded animal or a babe in distress, seeming to emanate from several directions at once. Those unlucky few who hadn't yet secured themselves in their tents felt an icy trickle of dread. "Jerry, was that you messing about?" came a nervous call across the camp, but only tense silence answered. The cry repeated, a touch closer this time. High and keening, it raised the fine hairs on the back of necks. Fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and youthful bravado, two of the younger men grabbed a powerful lead lantern and ventured towards the tree line, hefty hunting knives held at the ready. "All right, cut it out, you little shit," one of them shouted towards the unseen source of the sound. "Joke's over. Let's just get some shut-eye," but there was no response, except for that same mournful wailing, drifting between the looming trunks of the ancient trees ringing the camp. A sense of otherworldly wrongness hung in the crisp air, and both men instinctively felt the hairs stand up on their arms. "And maybe we should just head back," the second ventured after a tense moment. His words were nearly drowned out by a sudden resurgence of the sound, a bestial, agonized howl that seemed to reverberate from all directions at once. With a startled cry, the lantern slipped from his shaking hands and bounced against the hard-packed earth with a crack of shattering glass, plunging them into abject darkness. Panicked shouting erupted from the other campers as several started their truck engines, headlights probing the tree line in vain for whatever malevolent forces were at play. In the confusion and chaos of roaring motors and frantically gathered belongings, it went unnoticed at first when the two would-be investigators failed to return from the woods. It was only after the last terrified groups had peeled out of the hollow, gears stripped and tires clawing for purchase on the muddy road, that one horrified soul glanced across the fleeing caravan and saw two figures silhouetted against his truck's high beams. Slumped against a maple trunk, propped at unnatural, bone-twisted angles, were the barely recognizable bodies of the missing men. Even from the bouncing vehicle's distance, it was clear their demise had been brutal, agonizing bestial. One figure was missing its lower jaw, splintered bone and tattered flesh coating the churned-up soil in an ever-widening crimson wash. The other's torso was shredded to dripping ruin, flaps of skin hanging loosely to reveal a jumbled tangle of shredded organs and tissue. From the shadowy tree line, something seemed to stir and detach itself from the impenetrable darkness. Something massive and hunched, lumbering in an unnatural, non-human gait as it crept towards the macabre scene. As the first truck's headlights swept across its hulking, misshapen form, a piercing shriek cut through the night, the unwitting witness's scream of primal, soul-scorching terror quickly taken up by the others. For there, silhouetted against the bright beams, was no mere animal or beast. What abomination of nature could possibly recreate such a waking, malicious hunger where no natural predator should exist? A towering, amorphous shape of bone and ragged, fleshing tendrils that defied the human eye to process. Limbs far too numerous and pithed at strange, unspeakable angles that whipped and lashed in apparent ecstasy amidst the growing carnage. Fetid, open maw mouths that seemed to comprise its upper torso, gristle fangs dislocating wide enough to swallow a man's head whole. Each fleeting glimpse of its grotesque, ever-shifting visage drove those few who dared look upon it to the very brink of madness itself. And from those gaping, slavering jaws unleashed a cacophony of sound roars, shrieks, chirping insectile trills, and hateful, wheezing laughter, all woven into one unbearable assault on the senses. As the caravan of survivors fled the scene in blind terror, the ancient woods were left to whatever primordial, unfathomable evil lurked there. A potent, unseen power that silenced all those left behind, culling its latest sacrificial bounty for its own blasphemous hunger. Hours later, a demonic howl split the pre-dawn stillness, answered by distant, unholy screams that tortured wails of corrupted spirits being ripped from the material plane in droves, adding their ethereal misery to the eternal chorus of souls lost in the holler. The time of the Sawbones had returned once more.